The Endurance didn't just get trapped in ice. It became the stage for the greatest survival story in Antarctic history. Welcome back, everyone, to Hidden History Stories. In today's episode, we're diving into the frozen world of 1914, where Ernest Shackleton and his 27 men faced shipwreck, starvation, and the deadliest seas on Earth, yet somehow, not a single life was lost. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with anyone who loves epic, true adventures. Your support keeps these incredible stories alive. Now, let's begin. Picture this. You're trapped on a ship, watching 10-foot thick ice slowly crush your vessel like a tin can. The nearest human being is over 200 miles away. You have no radio, no GPS, no hope of rescue. And it's about to get so much worse. This is the story of Ernest Shackleton and 27 men who survived the impossible. The year was 1914, and Ernest Shackleton had a crazy idea. He wanted to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot, something no human had ever attempted. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. When he put out a newspaper ad looking for crew members, it read like a death sentence. Men wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness. Safe return doubtful. You know how many people applied? 5,000. 5,000 men willing to risk everything for adventure and glory. Shackleton handpicked his crew of 27. There was Frank Worsley, a navigator so skilled he could plot a course by the stars in a raging storm. Frank Wild, Shackleton's right-hand man who'd follow him into hell itself. And Thomas Orderlies, a former Royal Marine who knew machines inside and out. Now here's where things get interesting. The Endurance sailed from London in August 1914, just as World War I was tearing Europe apart. But these men had their own mission. They pushed south through the Atlantic, made a final stop at South Georgia Island, and then headed straight into the most dangerous waters on Earth, the Weddell Sea. At first, everything seemed perfect. By January 1915, they'd penetrated deeper into the pack ice than anyone before them. The men were excited, confident they'd make history, but then the ice started closing in. Picture this. Imagine you're in a parking lot and the cars around you start moving closer and closer until you can't open your doors. Except these aren't cars, they're house-sized chunks of ice, and they're not just blocking you in, they're trying to crush you. The Endurance found herself trapped in a frozen prison that stretched endlessly in every direction. No open water, no escape. Just ice, ice, and more ice. But the worst was still to come. For 10 long months, the ship drifted with the ice pack like a cork in a bathtub. Sometimes north, sometimes south, always at the mercy of currents they couldn't see or control. Now here's what's remarkable. Shackleton didn't let his men fall apart. They kept working, kept studying, kept playing football on the ice next to their frozen ship. Can you imagine that? Playing sports while trapped in the most hostile place on Earth. But listen to this. They could hear the ice around them. It made sounds like the Earth itself was groaning, like some massive beast was stirring beneath their feet. Huge pressure ridges formed where ice sheets collided, creating jagged mountains that could pulverize a ship in seconds. The men knew what was coming. They just didn't know when. Meanwhile, the pressure kept building. October 27, 1915. This is the day everything changed forever. The ice finally won its war against human engineering. The Endurance's hull started buckling under pressure that would make a hydraulic press look like a toy. You could hear the ship screaming. That's not poetic language, that's literal. Wood snapping, metal groaning, a beautiful vessel dying in agony. Shackleton gave the order that must have broken his heart. Abandon ship. Picture this scene. 28 men standing on the ice, watching their home for over a year get slowly devoured by forces beyond imagination. The mast tilted at impossible angles. The hull split like kindling. Everything they'd brought from civilization was being destroyed right in front of their eyes. Now they were truly alone. No ship. No communication with the outside world. Just 28 men, 3 small boats, and whatever supplies they could grab before their lifeline disappeared forever. But here's where Shackleton proved why he's considered one of history's greatest leaders. For 5 months, these men lived on an ice floe that was literally their entire world. Some days it was the size of several football fields. Other days, chunks would break off around them and they'd wake up on something barely bigger than a tennis court. Now, here's what blows my mind. Shackleton turned this nightmare into a functioning community. He assigned duties, kept routines, and somehow maintained morale and conditions that would break most people in days. They slept in tents that were always damp. They ate seal meat and penguin. They learned to read ice like sailors read the sea, understanding which areas were solid and which might suddenly crack open and swallow you whole. The ship's banjo became their most treasured possession. Music was the difference between sanity and madness during those endless Antarctic nights. But as they drifted north, their frozen island started falling apart. By April 1916, their ice floe was becoming a death trap. Cracks appeared daily, sometimes running right through their camp. Imagine going to sleep not knowing if you'd wake up on solid ice or in the freezing ocean. On April 9th, their world literally split in half. The floe broke completely, leaving them on a fragment barely large enough for their camp. The ice around them was churning like a massive blender, and they had no choice left. It was time to risk everything on 3 small boats, never designed for open ocean sailing. Now, here's where it gets absolutely terrifying. What happened next was 7 days of pure maritime horror. Picture this. You're packed into a boat meant for coastal work, trying to navigate through icebergs the size of skyscrapers and waves tall enough to flip you like a pancake. You're constantly soaked by freezing spray. Your clothes freeze solid on your body. And if you fall overboard, you're dead in minutes. The boats got separated in the chaos. Shackleton, commanding the James Caird, desperately searched for his other crews while trying to navigate through conditions that would terrify experienced sea captains. Frostbite was claiming fingers and toes. The men's faces turned black from exposure. Their lips cracked and bled from salt spray and cold. But then, after 7 days that felt like 7 years, April 15, 1916. They spotted land. Elephant Island, a barren, rocky outcrop that looked like the edge of the world. But it was solid ground, the first they'd stood on in 497 days. You know what these tough, hardened explorers did when they reached the beach? They fell to their knees and kissed the rocks. Grown men, overcome with emotion at touching something that wouldn't move beneath their feet. But here's the crushing reality. Elephant Island wasn't salvation. It was just another kind of prison. This place was uninhabited, far from any shipping routes, with almost no food or shelter. Nobody was coming to rescue them here. Ever. Now, here's where Shackleton made a decision that still gives me chills. Shackleton looked at that barren island and realized the truth. If they were going to live, someone had to go for help. The nearest inhabited land? South Georgia Island, 800 miles away. Across the Southern Ocean, waters so treacherous that sailors call it the graveyard of ships. Most people would call this suicide. Shackleton called it their only chance. He picked 5 men for this desperate voyage. Frank Worsley for his navigation skills, Tom Crean for his toughness, Timothy McCarthy for his seamanship, John Vincent for his strength, and Harry McNeish, their carpenter who would have to make their boat seaworthy. They took their biggest boat, the James Caird, and McNeish worked miracles. With frozen hands and primitive tools, he raised the sides, added a makeshift deck, and reinforced her structure. It was master craftsmanship under impossible conditions. But what they were about to attempt would make their previous ordeals look like a pleasant cruise. April 24, 1916. 6 men launched a 22-foot boat into the most dangerous ocean on Earth. Behind them, 22 men waited on Elephant Island under Frank Wild's command, not knowing if they'd ever see their leader again. Ahead lay 17 days of hell that would test the absolute limits of human endurance. Picture this. Mountainous seas taller than houses, gale-force winds that could flip your boat in seconds, and temperatures so cold that ice kept forming on their vessel, threatening to capsize them with its weight. Every few hours, someone had to crawl onto the slippery deck with an axe to chip away ice. One slip meant death. There was no rescuing someone who fell overboard in these conditions. Worsley was trying to navigate using instruments soaked in seawater, taking star readings from the deck of a tiny boat pitching wildly in massive swells. It was navigation at its most impossible. Meanwhile, far behind them, the men on Elephant Island were facing their own nightmare. Frank Wild kept those 22 men alive through sheer force of will. Every morning he had them pack their gear and be ready for rescue. Every single day for 4 months. They survived on a diet of seal, meat and penguin, living in shelters made from their overturned boats. They had no idea if Shackleton was alive or dead, but Wild never let them give up hope. Meanwhile, somewhere out in that terrible ocean, May 8, 1916. After 17 days of hell, Worsley spotted the cliffs of South Georgia Island rising from the ocean like a promised land. But their relief was short-lived. They were on the uninhabited south coast, and the whaling stations where they might find help were on the north side, across a range of unmapped mountains and glaciers that no human had ever crossed. Now, here's where it gets insane. They had no mountain climbing equipment, no detailed maps, and they were already exhausted from their impossible sea journey. But Shackleton wasn't done gambling with death. Shackleton made one last desperate decision. He'd take Worsley and Crean across the mountains, while the other 3 stayed with the boat. If the mountain team didn't make it, everyone would die. On May 19th, 3 men began a trek across terrain that would challenge modern mountaineers with the best equipment. They carried almost nothing. Some food, a small stove, sleeping bags, and rope. They walked for 36 hours almost continuously, navigating by compass and pure instinct across peaks, valleys, and glaciers riddled with crevasses that could swallow a man without trace. At one point, they reached the top of a steep slope with no way around. What Shackleton suggested next was either genius or madness. They would slide down together, roped like children on a sled, not knowing what lay at the bottom. They shot down that mountainside in a controlled fall, betting their lives on luck and physics. But then, after crossing the unmapped interior of South Georgia Island, they heard the most beautiful sound imaginable. 6:30 a.m., May 20, 1916. The steam whistle of Stromness whaling station calling workers to their shift. 3 barely human figures stumbled into the station. They were blackened by sun and wind, their clothes in tatters, their hair and beards long and matted. The foreman didn't recognize them as human beings. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Shackleton." Now here's the final test. Could they rescue the men left behind? It took 3 attempts. The first 2 rescue ships couldn't break through the pack ice around Elephant Island. Meanwhile, those 22 men were slowly starving, wondering if they'd been forgotten by the world. But on August 31, 1916, the Chilean vessel Yelko finally broke through. And there, on the beach, were all 22 men, alive, waiting, ready to go. Frank Wild had kept them prepared for rescue every single day. Here's the incredible final fact. After 20 months in the most hostile environment on Earth, after impossible boat journeys and mountain crossings and months of starvation, not a single man was lost. 28 men went into the ice. 28 men came home. Shackleton had failed in his original mission to cross Antarctica, but he'd achieved something far greater. He'd proven that human beings can survive anything, absolutely anything, if they work together and never give up hope. When they returned to civilization, they found a world at war. Many of the men immediately enlisted to fight in World War I, carrying with them a confidence born from surviving the impossible. The story of the Endurance became legendary, a testament to leadership, courage, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. And here's the final twist. The Endurance herself remained lost beneath the ice for over a century, until 2022, when she was discovered in perfect condition, preserved by the Antarctic cold like a time capsule from one of history's greatest adventures. Sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that actually happened. That was the story of Ernest Shackleton and the Endurance, the Antarctic expedition that turned disaster into the greatest survival story ever told. If you found this journey inspiring, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss more hidden history stories. And let me know in the comments, what is your favorite historical era?